And good evening and welcome to Out of the Bag. This is Sean Maguire live on Healing Oracle Radio and People's Internet Radio. And it is the 13th of the 1st, 2021. So much going on this planet. And my guest today, who is on the show for the 12th, yes, that's a dozen shows we will have done after this one, is Ken Scott from Gemstone University and the Media Alliance Concept, Panterra Private Contract Association. You've been listening, I know you have, because I had loads of messages, etc., about to all the series of interviews with Ken, and you love them. And I don't know how far and how long they will continue, but more information is needed, I think, to help us all correct our status, etc. I want to invite back and wish a happy new year to Ken Scott. Ken Scott, are you with me?
Yes, I am, Sean. Good day.
Good day to you, and welcome back to Out of the Bag. I know it's been incredibly busy at the moment for things that you are doing. It's been actually quite difficult to get together to do this interview, Ken. So, so how are you doing, first of all?
I'm doing very well. I'm watching the planetary show unfold pretty much exactly as I expected it over the last year. And it's quite extraordinary. We are living moment to moment, breath to breath in the most extraordinary historical process of many lifetimes.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, it does feel like it's an incredible time to be alive, but also there seems to be so much negativity bubbling up. Is that the exposure that negativity is getting, and we're actually moving into a positive future, or are we actually heading into the grips of the New World Order and their vaccination program, etc.?
Yeah. Well, as you know, we have talked about, and I write about and speak in other areas, one of the principal and fundamental constructs in the holographic reality we are in is the binary mind, the polarized split masculine principle, things like that. Mm-hmm. So basically, yes, you said it correctly, that we could call it being exposed, but how I look at it at a deeper level is we are, in a whole body sense, the humanity as a whole body, planetarily, we are purging and cleansing the internal separation, the internal split in our own collective being. Mm-hmm. And it has to go somewhere. It has to come up into visible and physical manifestation. So we're watching the great cleanse of the planet, the great awakening, the opening and shifting of consciousness, and basically the purging and cleansing. So yeah, it's very intense. There's quote unquote a lot of negativity, but rather than saying it's going to the positive, what I prefer to say, it's going to peace. It's going to internal integrated balance, standing individually and collectively. So if we go to the positive, then we keep in a polarity with the negative. It's more like we are going to wholeness.
Okay. So we've been at war for so long. I mean, every single generation, for centuries, it seems to have been at this horrible, destructive war-like stance. So wouldn't it be great if we all, moved into peace?
Yeah, what a concept.
Yeah, exactly.
Imagine that. Somebody sung a song about that.
Wouldn't that be wonderful if we actually cared for each other? So Ken, obviously with the amount of wonderful interviews we've done already, questions have been popping up from various people, and we have a list of questions today. Do you want to address them first before we move into anything else, or I mean, yes, I think that is the best idea, because I have been watching, obviously, your manifestation series of videos, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But at the moment, we do have a list of questions. Have you got the list of them, or shall I read them out to you, Ken?
No, I have them in front of me, and I do want to clarify for people listening, when you mention the manifestation series, people will say, well, where is that? Where can I find that? Well,
you're right. Sorry.
That is for only Panterra members. It's inside the Gemstone University website. And it's basically an ongoing, there's been several series that I've been doing for our members for a little over 3 years in terms of reporting real-time events as they unfolded and integrating it with our plans, our master plan, and our direction of fulfilling that, and all the things we've talked about, work in the world, projects, and so forth. And so now we're calling it manifestation because we're standing on the precipice of about to truly actually manifest it into reality, or at least this physical reality. And then I'm sure people would say, well, how come we can't see that? Well, there's a lot of private proprietary things that really cannot be put out in the public. But as I mentioned over the last 2 to 4 videos that we've done, that we have been preparing to shift a lot of the content out of the private side of the Panterra or the Gemstone University and shift it into the public, as well as starting to build the Gemstone Global Media Alliance platform. We're a bit behind my projected schedule from a year ago, what I wanted to have happen and be in place by the end of last year, given lots of events, lots of things that had to be dealt with both in our own inner membership and society as well as globally. That schedule got pushed back a bit, but we are really at the beginning point of truly mobilizing into building all of that. So virtually all or most of all of that private content is going to be made public in the course of the next 12 months. So
well, that's brilliant. Would it be okay then? You won't mind me asking you a few questions from it and bringing up subjects from those videos?
No, absolutely, especially
Brilliant.
current events and how it relates to what we're watching unfold.
Absolutely brilliant. Okay, so we'll go straight into the questions then, and as you have them, I'll let you attack them, I suppose.
Well, I'm not
with
going to attack them, but I'm going to bring them up and address them. So,
Okay.
We have a couple of questions from Julie. Hi, Julie. Thanks for your questions. They're very well worded, well intelligently framed, and I appreciate how you approach that. And I think one of them was way back late November. Excuse us for the delay in getting to it, but we're going to get to them now. So Julie is a biologist, and so I'll start with the first one she sent on November 29th. Hi, Sean. I love the series of interviews you're doing with Ken. Very informative and, yes, life-changing. I do hope there will be more. I have a question for him when you meet in December. Well, here it is. We're meeting now in January. She says, I have begun the application process for membership to Gemstone University and the Panterra Master Plan document, or in the Master Plan document, it says that the purpose of the society, quote, encompasses an understanding of the nature of the problem in the structural misalignment of our most fundamental systems, namely the law and monetary structure, because these infuse every action, every event, and every institution in the world, as well as the lives of every living being and that of their families, communities, and nations. Now, I understand what you're saying here, and I don't disagree with it, but as a biologist, she says, of a new variety, look forward to understanding what the new variety is. I understand that in a dynamic terrain, form and matter co-arise with consciousness. And she's speaking about basically the terrain, call it theory, but I don't consider it theory, basically that our living body or living biological system is a terrain. It's not a mechanical system, and so it's dynamic. It's dynamic in terms of we basically are a living environment of billions and trillions of living beings. So it's basically a terrain or an ecosystem. So she refers to form and matter that co-arise with consciousness. So she says, I want to suggest that our most fundamental systems are not law and money, but our quantum human biology. physiology, neurology, electrochemistry, biophysics, sociobiology. Of course, all these systems give rise to and sustain the human-created world. But currently, this is a parasite-host relationship and not as mirrored outer world, inner world equivalent. So it seems to me that in addition to creating and sustaining systems that serve human beings, we also need a creative and evolving cultural life, personal and social habits, customs, rituals, idling time, and much more. I want to suggest that a dynamically balanced, attuned, and evolving biology is perhaps worthy of a mention in the master plan, lest we find ourselves serving an external and ultimately parasitic master again. How are you with human biology? What are your thoughts on it? Could it be that this is a distinction worthy of mention? Well, yes. How am I with human biology? I enjoy it very much. I have one, actually. We all have human biology. We all have a terrain-based ecosystem of a human system. And I don't know if I've mentioned, Sean, to you or in these talks that along with study of law and history and money, I've been very immersed in the study of health and healing and physiology and nutrition and all of that for over 45 years. And with my wife together, 29 years now, we go very deep and wide in that. And for us, the real wealth of our life is the healthy, living, dynamic system of the human body. So, Julie, I completely agree with you. And I just want to point out that if you reread the quoted sentence from the master plan, it's not contrary to what you're suggesting. Now, in the master plan, I did not specifically reference the things you're talking about human biology, but we do talk about building living universities, land-based communities, as many, many people are doing around the world. And for us and many, health, healing, rejuvenation, and dynamic living in the human biology, both individually and socially, is to us the highest form of wealth and abundance on the planet. So conversely, we can look at what has the legal and monetary system wrought in terms of individual health, social health, national political health, global health. It's created basically dysfunctional, diseased, fragmented, separated systems, whether it's our own personal body. Most people, especially in America, but pretty much worldwide, pretty much only live in a disease model. Everything's about disease. Everything is about attack or suppression of symptoms, and it's the germ theory or the virus theory, which is really an outer picturing of what I talk about the enemy construct. The germs are attacking us, the virus is attacking us, rather than reestablishing a balanced and dynamic, healthy terrain in the ecosystem of our human biology as well as in our social biology. And so that's fundamental to where Panterra is going. So if we reread what you quoted, that it says the purpose of the society, in quote, encompasses an understanding of the nature of the problem. So it's talking about the problem. We're not talking, in this sentence, we're not talking about the solution. The nature of the problem in the structural misalignment. So we're talking about structural, meaning the structure of politics, monetary systems, legal systems, the structure of bonding, the human living terrain to a dysfunctional bonded surety debt monetized relationship with the matrix or the Babylonian money system. So that's what it's addressing when it says our plan encompasses, maybe the word should be, is directed towards understanding the nature of the problem in order to find or to implement the solution relative to the structural misalignment of our most fundamental systems. in our life, law and money affect everything, no matter what it is. If you go to the store and buy a pack of gum or a book or an apple, there is a tax attached to it. There's a commercial contract. There are many, many, many deeply layered things that are attached to every single thing that we do in legal and monetary terms and the structure thereof. And then it goes on to say in the quote, because these infuse every action, every event, and every institution of our world, as well as the lives of every living being, our families, communities, and nations. So you're just highlighting the focus in that sentence of what is the fundamental issue in the systems that we have been bonded to and contracted with.
You still there, Ken?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can. Yes. Sorry.
Okay, I just stopped. That was your cue, Sean, to say something.
Oh well. Okay. Well, I'm glad Julie had her question answered, and I think you answered it very well. So what you're actually saying is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it let's use the word encompassing. It does encompass all of it, our human biology, right the way through to how we interact with the land, with the buildings on the land, with all of it, and that they are like living entities, I suppose. Is that correct?
Which the buildings and the systems?
Yes, like the systems that we create end up taking, I suppose, without breath, but they take on life. Is that am I reading it right?
Well, they do. As far as my perspective, all things have a level of living consciousness.
Right.
There's a book, a very influential book that came out in the 70s by a woman. I don't remember her name right offhand, but a lot of people who lived through that period and read books at that time will recognize it. It's called Behaving as If the God in All Life Matters. Okay. And so there is a consciousness and a living consciousness and that arises in everything in a creational field. We are in a creational field, a planetary creational field that is embedded or sits in a dynamic equilibrium with other creational fields, a solar system, a galaxy, a universe, a cosmos, and multiverse, and so forth. But source and creation are in every unit of consciousness, every unit of matter, and as units of consciousness in terms of an individual sentient being or a group of beings come together to create form, and that's what she talks about in the second paragraph. She says, as a biologist, I understand that in a dynamic terrain, which is really what a creational field is, form and matter co-arise with consciousness. So she says it precisely right there. But the issue is then, what are the systemic structures embedded in where form and matter co-arise with consciousness, and who is directing or what is directing the consciousness that is in control or seemingly has been in control with the structural environment of our social, economic, educational, political, and monetary and legal systems, and what is the purpose of that? That's what we're facing. That's what we're dealing with, and is really coming to a head right now in current events, which we'll talk about later, that it's time for us to let go of being passive and being at the effect of those systems that we did ostensibly or tacitly agree to, but we have the right and the capacity to remove that agreement, rescinding our signatures, terminating vows, oaths, agreements, contracts, and pledges of surety and all of that, and shifting our focus to what we want to recreate in this creational field as a world that stands in peace and that all living beings are honored, respected, and elevated to a high standard for all living beings. So that's really, so she has it very precisely in the way she described it. And it's just, it's not contrary to what the quoted section was.
Right, okay. So, I mean, basically she's saying the same thing just in a different way, and asking the question to verify maybe that her way of looking at it is okay, I suppose, and follows what you're doing and what she's doing also. Yeah. Sure. How do we know, though, that, how do we know about these contracts? How do we rescind contracts we don't know about? If we're in a contract and we're unaware that we're in those contracts, where is the ability to rescind them? Yeah.
Well, the ability to rescind is embedded and hardwired in all forms of law. There are things in the normal, call it public system of law, such as unjust enrichment, unconscionable contracts. The valid substance of a contract has to have about 6 requirements that must be met. A meeting of the minds, parties who have sound mind and body to enter into contracts and have the authority to sign if they're signing for another entity, just consideration and essentially equity in the contract in terms of honoring the equity of all parties, things like that. And this subject comes up all the time. People, especially have looked at law and really studied what's going on. They have a hard time when I say ultimately, technically, everything has been constructed by extremely brilliant minds to create a global prison and enslavement system, has actually followed the letter of the law. And in so doing, and to really demonstrate that takes years of study. And it also takes the ability to let go of the binary mind, to let go of that polarity and only seeing an external enemy who has defrauded us, who has cheated us, stolen from us. Yes, in the ultimate sense, in the moral basis of things, that is all true.
It is.
But we're just talking about the law and how to walk ourselves out of the bondage. And it works so much better. And my life and my path of 30 years in the law is definitely a testament or a highlight that what I'm saying is true. I'm speaking from my own experience and vast amount of observation of many, many other people. There's not one person who stepped up to a level of expertise in the law who essentially attacked the system and made it his or her enemy and tried to use commerce, which is a field of battle, and the components of commerce, liens and various things, processes and so forth. There's hardly any of them who got to a certain level and did those sort of things who didn't go to jail or prison and basically lose a massive amount of their life and their life force and their energy. But I took a path 5 to 10 years ago and I veered away from that. I started looking at equity and balance and how that we could step above it and we can utilize what's embedded in law, which is the fact that in law you can do what you're asking. You can rescind and revoke and terminate contracts and powers of attorney based on mistake and error and based on unjust enrichment or unconscionable contracts, things like that. And in every law form, there is one key thing, which is law must always carry a remedy. There must be a remedy. So if we take this in the largest scale of it, let's look at the fact that there must be a remedy on a planetary level. And what we're watching unfold exactly as we speak and what's been happening leading up to the events of last week, what's going what's happening right now today and over the next 10 days. This is the remedy, and it is a remedy in law, both at the highest level, call it universal law, or if you like, divine law, divine principles, and in terms of man-made law and constitution and so forth. So we'll get into that the second part of our call.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I know people want to know what's going on. I actually have been quite busy today, so today is supposed to be quite an important day as well, and I'm not quite sure what's going on. I'm going to have to look at it after the interview, etc. And then Wednesday is also supposed to be another big day. But really, from Ireland and looking at the mainstream media, it looked like an absolute farce. It looked like a setup. It looked like a joke. It looked like they got some actors together who were let in because obviously security wasn't very tight there, and they were able to do photo opportunities and all sorts of stuff, and it was just ridiculous. And if that's and obviously we were told it was all the cult of Trump. It was all Trumpites that were there doing it. And that's who they are. You do a bit of research and you look into it, and you see that your man worked for BLM and this fella worked for Antifa and he's an actor doing such and such. So it does look like it was a complete staged event. I mean, I'm sure you're going to explain a little bit more about it later.
Yeah. So let's put that off to
yes
to a little bit later, but absolutely. And so moving into the second question that Julie asked, there's some prefatory stuff leading to where she says she's talking about another source that she looks at, and she says the woman involved with that explores how the world's billionaires are planning to get us to code into reality a global open-air prison run by satellite constellation and 5 or 6G, where we can be risk profiled, geofenced in real time, and basically controlled through behavioral programs and all the rest of it. And of course, I mean, that is the bottom line. And I speak of, write, and educate to this very point, and it actually relates to her first question, which is why I wanted to start with these, that when we talk about status correction, as I've talked about before in our conversations, we're talking about how all property on the planet is held in some form of an estate. The ultimate estate, well, of course, in the hierarchical feudal system of lords and vassals and landed gentry and so forth, the crown or the sovereign holds all the land and grants land to the landed gentry or the nobility. There's a contract there. It's called a oath of fealty, which is an oath of loyalty back to the crown or to the sovereign. And every of those lands are titled. So we're used to, because we grew up in it, we were trained in it, many people have their professions in it, we're used to people talking about property title and title insurance and things like that. But there's a history of how land was overlaid with this whole system of insurance and titling and so forth. It's too involved to go into in the call. But what we need to look at is that the real substance of the living planet and the living systems and bodies on the planet is real living matter. It's the substance. It's what that book, Behaving as If the God in All Life Mattered, and she used that word mattered, and matter comes from the Latin, which variously means mother or physical matter or matrices and things like that. And the legal and monetary system is an overlay. It overlaid the land with a system of titling and essentially monetized debt, and it overlaid our bodies with the same thing, a form of a title and attached insurance and a method of monetizing the debt. So within their system, they intended to have a global elite, which is made up of royalties, titled names, billionaires, those on the very top, who would control all the substance of the planet. And so this is where estates were created, and the function of what is called a living beneficiary, holding the land and the title, passing it from one living beneficiary to the next. And the vast rest of the population were put into a second type of an estate called a decedent estate, which is a dead estate or a dying estate. So it's all about containing the living bodies of humanity into a plantation where we're just cattle on the field being harvested. And fundamentally, the most important underlying part of our living estate is our genetics. Mm-hmm. And so when she talks about billionaires planning to get us to code into reality a global open air prison run by satellite constellations of 5G, etc., we look at certain patents that have been created by the Gates Foundation, by the pharmaceutical companies, and many people listening know what's really going on with the agenda of the vaccines and everything. It's to basically fuse a nanotechnology to the fundamental building block of that biology that Julie talks about, which is our genetics and our cellular system that makes up the component parts of a living terrain or a living dynamic system called a human body. And so we're going, we have gone to where functions of exchange, monetary functions, went from physical things, barter of chickens and cows and clams and so forth, to things that represented that, like clam shells or wampum or beads or what have you, to a form that has been traditionally accepted for thousands of years, which is coin in the form of metal that's durable, relatively rare, and could be set up in just weights and measures. It went from that to representations where those coin were kept in warehouses and warehouse receipts that were demand receipts, meaning I'll take that piece of paper, but I can come back the next day and I can demand I want my silver coin back. Or I can give that piece of paper to Sean, and now he can go because he's the holder of that bearer instrument, that warehouse receipt, and he can demand it. And progressively, that was separated to that. It ultimately came to the point where the paper didn't have anything attached to it. Yeah. And what they replaced with it was the living systems of the human creator capacity in this creational field, in a co-creational relationship with the body, planetary body, as well as the solar system and all the way up to source. So they wanted to access, control, and purport to own our source creator capacity and entrain it in a perpetual prison because they are parasites and they have disconnected from their ability to create. And so it went from coin to coin in the warehouse to bonded receipts to separation of that receipts to fiat currency that became attached to our surety bonded relationship to the debt that was created within that paper and electronic system, moving it to pure electronics, cashless system. That's where we're on the precipice of, and then taking that pure electronics and reattaching it to the biology through nanotechnology to just make a pure connection between the genetic estate, not only of our physical body in this time and space, but of all of our creational estate of who we are since we, issued as a life stream from source and creation itself. They're trying to basically take over creation in this universe. Yeah. And we are the grounding point of that, but we're also the stopping point. And that's actually where we're at exactly in this time of history. It's planetary history, but it's literally universal and cosmic history. We're making a stand of a parasitic form of consciousness that has ravaged life systems for millions and perhaps billions of years. And this is why we're here. This is, our last stand.
I mean, are we going to be able to because as you say, going to peace is one thing. Are we going to be able to stop the United Nations Agenda 21? Are we going to be able to stop all these plans to, I suppose, turn us into cyborg money-making machines for the pharmaceuticals and corporates of the future?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I'll answer that in a second. But to finish that,
okay.
The Gates Foundation has, and we may have mentioned that on our calls before. I don't know if we did. Mm-hmm. And probably some people listening do know about this. But they actually have a patented technology that is what I just described, that would literally remove, ultimately, it's intended and designed to remove all the intermediary forms, all the way down to even the electronics and the computer digital reality of credit, debit cards, and electronic banking and blockchain and whatever, that literally it could monitor and track everything we do and both monetize it in debt, charge for it, and basically make us pay for our living systems, our mitochondrial ATP energy generating in the body, our breath. I mean, they're already moving towards, people used to joke, sooner or later they're going to charge us just to breathe. Well, they already do. It's called a carbon tax. When we breathe in oxygen, we breathe out carbon, and they're taxing it. So one way or the other, they're moving to monetize and bond and enslave the very breath of every being on the planet and every biological event. Yeah. So that's what we're seeing as their end game. More and more people have woken up to see it. There's probably a small percentage of those who have woken up who actually see what I've described, but people are waking up to seeing, what you talked about earlier, the absolute absurdity of the play acting that went on last Wednesday. Yeah. It's so baldly self-evident, and the mainstream media makes it look like, there's big headlines, insurrectionist mob takes over the Capitol intending to take down the government. Yeah, right. They're really going to take down the government. Most of the people in the Capitol building were just walking around through the roped guidelines and taking selfies. A few dozen people are going to take over the U.S. government. Yes, of course, that's real. And because the media still has a last semblance of control of their voice, they can amplify things. They can take pictures that are properly staged. They can take video or camera shots and play it on the 6 o'clock news and put big blazing headlines that evoke emotion and stuff. But that doesn't mean the majority of the population actually believes it anymore. I think a very small, dedicated core of the insane believe it and want to make it so. But, basically, if you look at the facts of the last 4 years, they've been trying to unseat Donald Trump from the office of the president since before he actually was elected, during his president-elect period before inauguration, and for the last 4 years. It culminated in the events of the last 9 weeks since November 3rd. Yeah. But they weren't able to do that. Secondly, we see what he has been doing. And for one, he's been bringing situations to peace around the planet. He has not started any wars. He's done many things that have built and supported a strong base in the United States to prepare for the period that we're in now. But most importantly, he has the loyalty of a strong faction of the U.S. military. So they didn't do all of what, I just did a quick summary of that. They didn't do all of that just for him to slump his shoulders, bow his head, and walk away in defeat, as some of the stupid videos out there on Twitter would like to make it look like. I saw one where there's this, image of Trump that he's kind of dancing, moving his arms and wiggling a bit. It's not not full dancing, but sort of his happy dance in some rally that's now become sort of iconic. And somebody pasted that onto a boat, a shoddy boat that's sinking, and he's dancing while his boat is sinking. Well, they'd like to believe that's true, and nothing is further from the truth. They didn't do everything they did and come all this way just to turn the United States government over to a completely controlled Democratic bloc of President, House, and Senate, and so forth. They're not going to do that. It's not going to happen. What's about to happen, what we're going to watch in the next 10 days is extraordinary, and it's historical. Many people call it biblical, which certainly it is at that level, and it is a completion of history, and it's an activation of all the things that people of good heart and intent and spirit want to see on this planet. It's going to be rough. It's going to be, it's that purging and cleansing. They're going to go crazy. There's going to be a lot of stuff to clean up, but we are at that point of moving through that and imminently about to activate a whole new world system.
It is incredible. I mean, because if you do dip your toes into the mainstream media, especially here in Ireland with RTE and very close links to BBC, it really seems like we're being told that Trump is a spoiled brat who's lost an election and just won't accept the truth.
Yeah.
And that he has no proof or any investigative stuff behind him to say otherwise.
Yeah. Well, they're all following the Joseph Goebbels University of Media and Propaganda. Tell a lie big enough, long enough, and consistently enough, and they'll start believing it. But this time, more and more don't believe it at all. So BBC, what does that stand for? Big bull crap?
Boy buggering company, I think.
Okay, bovine buggery company.
Yeah, it's definitely bull anyway, yeah.
So I can't speak about the BBC, what its near to medium future is, but I'm quite sure that those companies in the jurisdiction of the United States are subject to all the laws thereof, including executive orders and national emergencies and full implemented martial law, which we are now in, and we have been for quite a while. Many people say, well, if we're in martial law, why can't we see it? Well, martial law is not just a bunch of guys running out on the street with camouflage and guns and tanks saying, okay, everybody in your house, get on the ground, we're taking over. No, it doesn't work that way. Martial law fundamentally means that functions of civil government are suspended and are under the martial or military authority. So we have been in that for a while. We've been in numerous declared national emergencies over the last 2 years and more. All the national emergencies are precisely targeted to what they need to be. It basically gives the office of the executive full authority to implement and enforce those executive orders. So combine executive orders with national emergencies and other things that have been put in place over the last 80 years, all of which was designed to have the final president, which was intended in their playbook to be Hillary Clinton, to basically be implemented and applied to the American people and then to the global population. I mean, it would not have stopped in America. This was always intended to be a global fascist state, globalist state. And so all of that was set up over 80 years and hundreds and thousands of years to culminate in the last 4 years was turned upon them and was very, very incredibly precisely set up and structured and strategized to culminate in the moment we're in. And so the major actors, the major players in politics, in banking, in media, in judicial, they're all guilty of seditious conspiracy, treason, and various other things. And they are all being rounded up, arrested, and so forth right now. So
when are we going to see some actual proof of that? I mean, I'd
the next 10 days.
Really? I mean, I genuinely want to see, Hillary in handcuffs. I want to see people around the world. Tony Blair, I want to see him in a prison. I want to see these people. I don't want to, I've got no grudge against them as human beings. We love each other. But the things, the actions that they've done.
Wait. First of all, are they human beings anymore?
I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's the point, First of all, let's define terms. We are actually not human beings. We are living, co-creational beings. A human being, you ever look at the law dictionary and see what a human being is defined as?
Yeah, they call it a monster, but I mean, isn't that just the way they try and twist words and stuff? But
Well, yeah, but but it's precise. The use of language and words is very key to understanding the aberrancy of the overlay legal system, but also understanding the substance of the underlying remedy.
Yeah. But you know what? I like turning things back on itself, and to be honest, to them, we are monsters because we will bring it down.
Let me define it, and you'll understand. Okay. And you look under the term monster in the legal dictionary, it says one who does not have inheritable blood. What is blood? Blood is the carrier of the life force and the genetics within the human, let's not say human, within the living system of the biological terrain that we all occupy and have to live and walk on this planet. So what does that mean, inheritable blood? Well, it goes back to what I just said about the living beneficiary who holds a title to a titled estate. And the title is, the 10th Earl of Muckety-Muck and the Baron of this and the Duke and the Prince of that. Those are titles of landed estates. Those are inheritable titles based on blood. Okay, so a monster, meaning one who doesn't have inheritable blood, means you cannot have standing on the land. You cannot inherit the land. And everything we're talking about is, we can speak in terms of energetic and spiritual terms. We need to return to the feet on the ground in real terms without anything legally, energetically in between. Okay. This is what status correction really means. Severing the attachment as the bonded surety to that person that they create as a public trust and property of the corporate state. That's what your name is. It's property of the corporate state. So we must disconnect from that, and we must regain our standing on the land and look at very key speeches that Trump made in his campaign in 2016 and periodically since then. He says, I'm returning the power to the people. And power means standing in law and on the land. And this is key, and this is critical. And we can talk about that more in a minute. But this is why human being is called a monster, which means not having the capacity to have inheritable blood to be able to inherit a titled standing as a living beneficiary on the land. So we can change that. We can remove all that. That's just the presumption that we have consented to. So timely and properly objecting and providing notice of non-consent is key, which gets back to the proclamation that I mentioned three conversations ago with the Kingdom of David. Yes. And people were asking, and I spoke about that we're building something, and we haven't forgotten about that. It's taken a lot of work to fine-tune and integrate what we need to have. And also we needed, now I know it couldn't have gone out sooner. We will have that proclamation. We'll have a website with it. and the education and the instructions and the detail on that website. But fundamentally, that proclamation is and will be from the highest level of law as a crown sovereign on the planet. We can talk about that in a moment. People will immediately think, well, now you're going, hierarchical, you're just creating another king and all that. And it's not that. We are definitely, people who have listened to me for 11 times so far should know I would not support recreating the same problem. We're using the law form, including their construct of royal houses and so forth, to reverse everything, just as Trump has used executive orders and everything that was embedded in the office of the executive to be used against the people. He's doing it on the political level. David is using it on the, let's call the royal house level, and using the word and the law that the entire system is built on to basically reverse and do the same thing that Trump said, return the power to the people. So the bottom line is, when King David issues his proclamation, it's an offer of contract that anybody can accept and becomes literally the highest form of law on the planet. And the acceptance is a simple acceptance, a commitment within oneself and to life, to support life, to go to peace and work together to rebuild a new perfect world. And secondly, there's a document accompanying that, which is a personal declaration of peace and sovereign integrity, because that's the title of the proclamation, that we individually declare we are at peace and we reclaim our life and our sovereign integrity, and we issue that as a document. It's a 2-page document, and that is a mandate to the world system of non-consent. We have to stand on our non-consent to participate in what has been designed for our prison and our death, basically.
Yeah, it is incredible that we, obviously when people mention royalty, and especially people in Ireland, you mention royalty and straight away we think, oh no, that's, we're subjects to royalty. So I've always said it for years and years and years, and maybe this is the case, that for us to change things in this world, we do have to shake hands and hug and work with people in families that they've grown up with land, they've grown up with riches, they've grown up in royalty, they've grown up with connections and bloodlines, etc. Some of them have got to break away from that and use their wealth and their title for us.
Yeah, well, I think a lot have. In the past, those who did not conform to that basically were eliminated. Read the history of hundreds and hundreds of history of royalty and aristocracy. How many,
had their heads chopped off.
Patricides, fratricides, fraternal wars and all kinds of things. I mean, they're just, when there's a hierarchy and you're dealing with parasitic consciousness that can never have enough, can never be full because they are vacuous in their lack of true being, and it's hierarchical, then only one can be at the top, and they all want to be there, so they fight for thrones, and who's going to occupy the throne of Peter and the papacy and all this stuff. And it's a collapsing hologram, it's a collapsing model, for one, because humanity is removing its consent and it's removing its consciousness from animating that matrix Babylonian money system form that has been our own self-created imprisonment. They created the template, we accepted it and fulfilled it. So everything that's happened in recent days and weeks and in the last few years is an opportunity for people to look head on into the abyss of the potential future that humanity has created for itself in acceptance and consenting to this bizarre reality. So it had to be brought to the fore for people to see. And that's the extraordinary brilliance of the last 4 years. to bring it to this point. And I will guarantee you, Sean, major things will be exposed and revealed pretty much starting today.
Right. I was told
Joe Biden will not be president. If he wants to be president of his little cell block down in Guantanamo, well, that's fine. He can see if Hillary and Barack will vote for him. But he's not going to be president of any office in this country.
But they could stage it again and just pretend that he is, and pretend that he's got the support of everything, and carry on with their media war and their media, I suppose, bullshit.
Yeah, they could, but they're not. I don't know how. I don't know. Even with my sources and my knowledge, I don't know what the next 10 days will portend. I do know that Donald Trump is the last president of the U.S. corporation and of the U.S. system for the last 200 and roughly 40 years or 30 years. The first presidency was 1789, and we've had 45 presidents. We've also had 3 periods of federal bankruptcy of 70 years per period that went from 1789 to 1859 to 1929, that coincidentally corresponded with the first one ended and was reorganized, and they had the Civil War and they created the corporation. The second one ended in 29, and they had the economic crash. They created the new bonded surety attachment on the people. So to restate that so people are clear, it's a very hard concept to understand. The Constitution, which is a very extraordinary instrument, but it had the elements and the attachments that were required by international law and relations at that time. It's a brilliant instrument, but ultimately it was the primary debt instrument of the entire planet.
Wow.
How do you take that?
Well, I mean, living in Ireland, I know you look at the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and all that in America as being really, really important with the Bank of England and Washington, D.C. and the Vatican. Here in Ireland, we go back to the 1150 Papal Bull of Pope Adrian, who gave our island and its people to a fecking King of England as a gift. So we want to rescind that one.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, and these are the things that ultimately humanity has to do, and go through the layers of history, whether it's Ireland or Canada, Australia, all of the first-tier Commonwealth countries that came out of the British Empire. Those had different constructs and different elements, including from the Pope. Yeah. And the United States has its role and so forth. So we have to unwind all that.
Yeah.
But if we didn't stop what was happening here in the United States, there would be no possibility to do that. So let me ask you, how do you think that, what does that mean if I say, because we say that everybody's in bonded debt to this monetized debt, perpetual enslavement system on the planet.
Okay.
Well, how did that happen, and what is the primary debt instrument? So I say the primary debt instrument is the Constitution of the United States of America. Mm-hmm. How do you relate to that statement?
I say there were earlier documents that were just as important. The English would say the Magna Carta. There would be people in Ireland that would say, it goes way back to the mystic Celts and the chieftains of Eire. That's all very important. These contracts were
I agree, but you're veering off the subject. I said the primary debt instrument. Okay, you're talking about different things. The Magna Carta was an instrument or a charter of rights between landed noblemen and King John.
Yes, that's true.
And so, are you a landed nobleman?
No, but obviously they spoke for us, didn't they? And that's what. No, but that's what.
Didn't.
But that's what's happening. They are speaking.
That's where people get go into a fantasy and think that we have all of those rights of landed noblemen. That is the feudal relationship between the sovereign crown, the lord, which wasn't called lord. The word lord didn't even come into existence till the 1500s. But the crown sovereign in the form of King John, and what the document refers to as his barons, which are landed noblemen, landed
But I would,
title holders.
I would love to share with you, though, Ken, the importance of Ireland. It doesn't go back as far as the American Constitution, but the Irish Constitution of 1919 was based on a ratified referendum by the Irish people that was basically ignored by the British. They killed and got rid of the voted-in Parliament, the Dáil, and they replaced it with their British version, splitting up the country into a 6-county, 26-county, instead of the 32-county that we all voted on, or at least my generation before did.
I agree, and I understand that. And there's underlying substance of same or similar, like in New Zealand, there's a I wouldn't call it's not a constitution, because a constitution, which is, we'll get back to that, the debt part of it. But in 1835, there was a solid agreement between the true landholders, the Maori, or the indigenous First People, and the British Commonwealth. That's been buried and overlaid. The same exists in Canada and Australia and so forth. So we're talking about legal manipulation and gyration to turn all of that upside down and overlay it. So, and that's the key thing. It's an overlay. What we have to do is remove the overlay from the land, from the body's politic, and the individual being. And we have the ability to do that. We have the knowledge, we have the jurisdiction and law form, we have all of that, and we will be doing that.
Brilliant.
But we have to look at these instruments of history objectively, and not fantasize or turn them into mythologies that actually, in the way they're acted upon, if you go to court and you say, I want to have my Magna Carta rights, you get laughed out of court or you get taken to jail.
Of course.
The Magna Carta rights do not apply to the serfs, the landless peasants. We are all landless peasants. We've been lifted off of the land. We have no standing in the land. We are only attached to admiralty, maritime jurisdiction, the law of the sea, and the nature of bankruptcy within the law of the sea, and so forth, and the civil codes that were given to have the illusion of rights, civil rights, and codes of civil procedure, and federal codes of civil procedure in the courts, and so forth, all with variations throughout the different countries in the world.
Well, isn't it great that all that's going to come to an end, really? Because when people start waking up and changing and status correcting and all the rest of it, their system is just going to fall apart, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And we're in that moment right now. And the way that's going to happen with the United States leading it is what we're watching happen right now, which is that over the last 4 years, it has been precisely and comprehensively documented of all the acts of treason, sedition, conspiracy, and so forth. And now we're in national emergencies. Now we're in martial law. So it's military courts, military justice that will now function, because the United States, as with the rest of the world, the judicial systems and the courts are completely corrupted, not partially, completely. So all the way up to the Supreme Court. So what we've watched is creating the evidentiary body that has been documented and tracked to bring all who were conspiring treasonously to truly sell the United States down the river, and they are going to be brought to military justice. And what will happen in the next some period of time, 4, 6, maybe 8 months, is we will be under a basically a military government with an acting civil body. And then at some point, basically reestablish true constitutional elected government with true clean election processes.
That'd be nice, Ken. Can we trust the military?
Well, put it this way: if we can't, we're screwed. That is the only
oh dear
option that's been. And fortunately, there's enough who truly have pure intentions, or relatively pure intentions, who uphold their own oaths to uphold and defend the Constitution, and they're fulfilling it.
Yeah.
So there is a faction, and they are in control.
I just find it a little bit strange that we're giving control to the military, and God help us, who joined the military. People who like to kill things,
Well, I understand that. Well, true, but a lot of them who also felt loyal and patriotic to their principles of government or country, stuff like that. Now, if we go on a sidetrack and we talk about the nature of consciousness relative to nationalism, patriotism, and all of that, ultimately that's a it's a relative thing that I don't ascribe to. But we live in a world where national identity is very, very significant. Cultural identity, racial identity, ethnicity identity, national identity is very, very important, but it's all been used to divide and conquer. So how do we return to a neutral standing in peace, where we're not projecting the enemy outside of ourselves and going to war in the form of violence and death and destruction, but we can, in diversity, rebuild unity and honor and respect for the nature of all diversity of expression. That's what we have to get to as a planetary body. It's been used against us, but it's been used through mind control, electronic mind control, media mind control, indoctrination through all the forms of that. We have to break out of that. We're in a vast level of matrix illusion, and it's going to take time.
Yeah, absolutely. They are very good at hypnosis, aren't they?
Absolutely. So back to the question, can we trust the military? We have no choice. Right. But again, it's like, can we trust a president? Can we trust a king? Can we trust a general? We have to, because that's the hardwired construct of the whole matrices of the world system. Yeah. So the office of the president has been occupied by somebody who truly is honorable and has the intent to stop it and reverse it, and he has achieved that side by side with the honorable, true oath-keeping military. He had to have the military. You're going to watch the truth of that statement over the next days and weeks. Right. That without the military, there'd be no chance. So we have to trust it. But I can definitely tell you, the part that's in control and implementing what I'm talking about is trustworthy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's very good. It's just a bit ironic that we're depending on military people to go to peace. But
right. Yeah. Well, isn't it said, turn swords into plowshares?
Yeah. Yeah.
How are we going to convert? It's that if you go back to our first conversation, I read my poem. You read your poem, if you remember.
I do.
My poem was about soldiers and military basically coming home.
Yeah.
Saying we will not fight our brothers from another land anymore.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, that's the way things should be. I mean, they've been using the proletariat, or the human beings. They've been using them for years as cannon fodder. serfs are the ones that, get sent out to wars and stuff. I think awareness has, over the centuries, has brought us to the time when, there isn't conscription anymore, that we've got past that, there is a choice whether to be a military man or not a military man, etc.
Yeah, but a lot of the people in the military did it by the illusion of voluntary conscription, but basically economically forced conscription. Now, a lot do join because they have that patriotism and loyalty, but a lot of those who have actually been sent off to foreign lands as cannon fodder did so because they had no other economic choice. And at least you go in the military, you have 3 meals a day,
and a bed for
you have an orderly life, you have a roof over your head unless you're out in the field. You just got to try to figure out how to stay alive. But we really are going to peace on this planet.
Great.
I'm absolutely certain of it.
Great to hear that. So shall we get back to some of these questions that were sent in, or...
Sure. I'm going to mute you for a second. I got to clear my throat.
Okie dokie. Yep. But we do have quite a few, and I'm thinking that we've only got sort of 50 minutes left, and I know that we've got a lot to get through. There was one, hi Sean, I stumbled upon your site by accident. Quite a heavy question, because it's part of a family that are having a bit of trouble in Australia. Did you read that one?
Yeah, I did. And I just want to put a placeholder that in the last 20, maybe 30 minutes, I do want to return to that point of how the Constitution is a primary debt instrument, how it relates to everything we've talked about today and in many of our calls, and for people to understand how it is functionally being, in a sense, transmuted and closed, because basically we're moving imminently into a period where all debt on this planet will be dissolved and settled.
And therefore, would that mean a completely new and different constitution?
Ultimately, yes. So hold that. Let's go to the question. We'll go back to that.
Okay. So we'll go back to the dead instrument in a bit. Okay. So it says, hi Ken, I've been listening to all your podcasts with Sean, as well as viewing your videos on YouTube, and also looking at your website on how to become a member. I live in Australia, and to cut a long story short, 2 of my family members have been imprisoned and given a harsh sentence for a crime they did not commit. We have all been left in shock and have just found out that if we appeal and it all goes wrong, just like the court case did, that they could possibly be looking at a much worse sentence than they already have been given, which sounds absolutely absurd to me. Anyway, in part 8 of your talk with Sean, you said that we all have the right, even if we are enslaved or in some sort of dungeon on the planet, to be able to claim everything back that pertains to us, and that we have the power to correct all our errors and mistakes, even if they were done 15 years ago, and settle all matters that are attached to us, revoking all contracts that we have made, and remove ourselves from the sea of commerce and back onto the land of the living. If this is true, can this be done with 2 prisoners who are innocent? And if so, what I really want to know is, could this be a way of getting out of jail for them or not? I look forward to your response, and thank you all for what you are doing.
Yes. Okay. And her name is Marie. And Marie, very... hang on, I got to do something here.
Okay.
Somebody's calling me on Signal on the computer. All right, Marie, very sorry to hear that. And unfortunately, that's too often the story with thousands and hundreds and really millions of people on the planet. And the short answer is yes. The medium answer is it takes time and it has to be done built on solid foundations. And the long-term answer is we have to build the foundations first and work together in what is emerging, both in terms of what we've talked about in these shows on the individual processes for status correction and so forth, and as well as on the macro scale. And this is why I make reference to the Kingdom of David and the fact that and you will see over the next short while, the next 30 days, roughly we will be publishing that website. It will have the proclamation of peace and sovereign integrity and the process that I briefly mentioned earlier. That is a starting point, but we also have to build foundational infrastructure. And it's not like we need 10 or 20 years to do that, but it's going to take a lot of people to come together, first and foremost, to build an educational foundation. So you understand all the things that I'm talking about. You won't necessarily, or I can guarantee you, you won't come to a complete quantum comprehensive understanding the way I have it, in the first 3 to 6 months. But you can build a solid foundation to start understanding and seeing the juxtaposition between the mirror image of the false reality and the true image of the living template that we are here in a living world. And how that relates to things like law, imprisonment, and things like that. So what I would suggest, Marie, is you do submit, go to the gemstoneuniversity.org site, find the membership application button, follow the steps, and submit your application to become a member. And it requires you to answer, go through some questions and write an essay, and include in your essay reference to the subject that you're interested to join with other Panterra members in Australia who are working to build the foundational structures, both for Panterra as well as the Gemstone Media platform, which will be emerging this year, as well as the Kingdom of David and its jurisdiction and its law form and its court system, all of which will be presented on the proclamation website that's going to be published within the next 30 days. So those are the steps you need to take and proactively take it up so that progressively at some point you will be part of building the solution in Australia that we can then at a certain point apply to your relatives as well as other people who are very basically who are political prisoners and so forth in that country and around the world. Probably I'd say 50% or more of prisoners in the United States and other first world countries are essentially political prisoners. Those who were railroaded for monetary purposes, commercial purposes, and or political purposes to remove them by the cabal and so forth. And what you need to understand fundamentally, except for capital crimes where there's murder, kidnap, or rape, or something that grievously harms another being, all other so-called crimes are commercial. They're not criminal. The criminal code is underwritten by the commercial code and the civil code. Yeah. So here in the United States, we have something that came out after 1933 in the late 30s called the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure and Criminal Procedure. And those are civil codes. Okay, civil codes attached to bankruptcy. They're part of admiralty law. They're part of the containment field for managing the contained, captured territory, persons, and property of a conquered nation or territory. When I talk at the end about how the Constitution is the debt instrument for the whole planet, you'll understand how this relates to everywhere, Australia and every other country. So it's all about harvesting. It's all about commercial bondage. Every time there's a charge, there's an underwriting of many bonds. Energetically, those bonds literally are feeding off of us. That goes back to Julie's question about, the integrity of the biological terrain versus the fundamental system of legal and monetary attachment. Everything is bonded. Everything is taxed. And so this is why the Gates patent and the ultimate agenda was to directly attach artificial technology to our living system, our genetics, our cellular structure, and our biological terrain to create perpetual bondage, debt monetization, entrainment, and life force extraction.
Yeah.
So when somebody is charged criminally, underlying that are civil, bonds, commercial charges, and money, basically. So, so the short answer is what you outlined there, as far as saying and repeating what I said, that we all can do that. And the answer is yes. But in order to do that, we can't do it onesie and twosie. We have to create foundational structures that we can properly and lawfully work together in our regional areas and build a system that will enable people to apply it and work together and progressively get people removed who are political prisoners or wrongly accused and sentenced and charged because that represented money to the state, and help remove these people from wrongful imprisonment.
Well, it'd be great if that could happen. I mean, something that's happening in the UK a lot more is that people are being charged with criminal offences, and then when the criminal offence has been proven to be untrue or unfounded, they then seem to put a mental health order, bring it in, and then the person, that instead of going to prison, they end up going into a mental ward in a hospital.
Right. Well, George Orwell knew what he was talking about because he came from an aristocratic family. He knew what they were talking about and what they were working together and building in the 20s, 30s, 40s when he was writing. So when he wrote 1984 in the Orwellian doublespeak of peace, war is peace, and imprisonment is liberation, and obedience is freedom. He knew what he was talking about. And I don't know if you've seen it on any of the videos that have managed to get through the censorship that's descending upon the United States and the world right now in true Orwellian fashion. But some of the absurd, actually, X-22. Do you watch that, Sean?
I don't actually, no. I'll have to look.
Do you know of that?
I've heard of it, yes.
Okay. Well, you and everybody need to be watching the X-22 report. It's a 30 to 40 minute. It's broken up in two parts every day except for Saturday. It's an A part and a B part. The B part is the geopolitical events, and he has the most concise reporting in a 30 or 40 minute report that he ties together many of the pieces. It will keep you on track even without anything else. Watching that every day is very, very valuable and essential if you want to follow what's going on. So it's just x22report.com.
Okay.
And just look for today's episode, and there's back episodes. It's highly recommended that you go back, and what I recommend is you listen to today's episode and continue doing it every day, and then go back a couple of months and pick one or two a week and listen to those, and then catch back up to the current, and it'll fill it in. But in the report the last couple of days, he was highlighting some of the absurdities of the Orwellian, complete attempt to completely crush free speech. And like there was I think it was in Georgia, a superintendent of a school basically saying that if you teachers or school personnel in any way are promoting or saying anything to do with Donald Trump, you will be summarily removed from your position, Wow. There were people, there was a couple, I think it was a couple, who were on an airplane in the last few days talking about Trump and the events of last week. The pilot landed the plane and had them removed from the plane.
Sorry, that's just a comedy sketch.
And basically the left Democrats and so forth are out there overtly on Twitter and other places saying, if you worked for, and Forbes magazine was another one, came out and said, if you worked for the Trump administration, we will find you. We will make sure you are not hireable. We will track you down, and we will marginalize and remove you from earning a livelihood and basically remove you from society. I mean, they're out there saying that.
So that's a repeat of McCarthyism.
Oh, it's even worse.
Yeah.
It's even worse. So, but it's good news because they're just exposing themselves for exactly what they are.
Yeah, definitely.
So back to Marie.
Yeah.
The beginning function will be in the proclamation. So link up to us. If you want to send a email to admin@panterrapca.org in reference to me in this show, I'll get that email, and then we'll contact you and assist you in getting going and linking you with the Australian base of our members and start getting in sync with all of that. And then the next step will be the process with the proclamation. And we will be educating people as to the law form and the jurisdiction and the court of the Kingdom of David. And keep in mind, David is an anagram. You take DA, you take that first A, and you put it at the back of the name. VIDA. You put an apostrophe between D and V. It says Davida, means life, of life. So we're talking about the kingdom of life, not a kingdom of a king who lords above everybody else. David is using the ancestral lineage of 124 unbroken generations from that biblical beginning. And the Bible is regardless of religion or belief or anything else, the Bible is the foundation of all law on this planet. So it's binding on all law systems, all political bodies, all jurisdictions. And that law form says that there will be a King David at the end of time. He will establish a kingdom, which he has done. He did it 10 to 15 years ago. And when he met me 2 years ago, I started working together with him and shifting it into the proper private superseding law form that is based on my work for the last 30 years, so that it will be, and it is now, the conduit or the doorway through which people will be able to walk and return to the land, to the standing, to the law, and have the highest jurisdictional form that will require and compel the inferior jurisdictions, such as the Australian government or the corporate, formerly corporate U.S. government and so forth, to align with the law of the people. And that's what we're implementing using that jurisdiction. It's called the Court of the Ecclesia. The Ecclesia means the body of the living beings who set themselves apart by walking out of the matrix and walking back into life. In that standing, we are the law. That's the power to the people that Donald Trump talks about. That's where we're at right now. And all it takes is lots of people to step up to that, to issue their mandate of non-consent, declare their sovereign integrity, and then progressively we will be able to refine and streamline the status correction course so that thousands and millions will be able to do it, because we can't do it at the pace that I've been doing for the last 15 years. It would take 10,000 or 10 million years, but there will be a way to exponentialize the acceleration or the expansion exponentially of the amount of people who will be able to do that. And what I've just described will be the beginning and the foundation of that. So, Marie, that's the steps to take. And there are other people we're directly connected to in Australia who essentially are wrongfully imprisoned. And one of the powers and authorities of the Court of the Ecclesia, with the Crown Sovereign authority behind it, is certain lawful writs that can remove court cases, whether they're ongoing or adjudicated, remove them into the court of the people and apply true law and true justice and true evidentiary proceedings and procedures to actually look at what's real, not what was trumped up to create commercial charges and bondage and imprisonment.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if that happened? And I hope Marie sends you that email and gets in contact with those people in Australia. It would be wonderful if there was some justice down the line, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, that's what we're here for.
Yeah. Okay, so we've only got half an hour left, Ken, so I don't know. Do we carry on with the questions, do you think?
Well, there's a couple real quick ones.
Yeah.
Let me read this one. Theoretically speaking, would a person with a passport, rental agreement, phone contract, car tax, and insurance, bank account, etc., be in any position to not pay income tax? The answer is no, because those are all contracts that received commercial and domestic or federal, which is the same thing. Those are really interchangeable terms, commercial, domestic, federal. They become fused together. They create those contracts. Those contracts are benefits for operating within their commercial sandbox. Mm-hmm. Basically, it's their sandbox. They can make the rules. That's the whole civil procedure, civil codes, admiralty, bankruptcy, everything that I've talked about. So income tax is really not income tax. It's a use tax of the use of the facility to create monetized debt in the name of your franchise. And that's complex, but that's the basic framework of it.
So is income tax not unlawful? I mean, aren't there people at the IRS leaving because they realize that they're actually robbing people?
Well, it's legal. Going back to what I said an hour and a half ago, it's founded on technically legal and constitutional law.
Yeah.
And it takes you just have to learn how that works to be able to understand why that's true. Mm-hmm. But again, what I also said is there's remedy embedded in the law. Okay. So the answer to the actual question is no, you still have to pay income tax with all those attached contracts. Yeah. But remember I said earlier, all debt is about to be removed from this planet. I don't know how that's going to work. I just know that it's true. I know that progressively people are going to be, and it may happen in a fairly instant quantum moment, or it may be feathered out over time. But the IRS works two ways. It's a collection agency to collect tax based on the proportionate calculation of the use tax for the creation of monetary public funds through the monetary system in your individual franchise case. But on the other side, their other half of their function is to settle and close the private side of the account when properly done. When you do status correction, you have the ability to do that without using public funds, aka Federal Reserve notes or Australian dollars or whatever in your domestic zone. But there's two ways to take care of a tax or a bill or a debt. One is to pay it with another debt instrument, meaning fiat currency. The other is to use the private equity underneath that in the underlying estate to settle and close that account. This is something that is about to happen on a global scale. I'll explain it when we get into the Constitution as a debt instrument. So right now, pay your bills unless you can't do it. Take care of what you're supposed to do and wait as things unfold. But I know it's coming, and I know that if we did not pay income tax or all the underlying hidden taxes and a lot of the use taxes, the volume of capital and liquidity that would be freed up to pay for health, to pay for social requirements. See what the whole world has been bamboozled into, especially in the United States, in this whole thing of, the polarization, and the left wants social justice, but really what they're being walked into is fascist communism, thinking it's social justice and being used as pawns, and thinking that the right is nothing but, billionaires who just want to milk everybody. Well, those are the extremes. But in the center, a balance between fiscal monetary policy and social justice and social benefit, that's going to peace. That's resolving that polarity. So if we dissolve the overlay of the system that's created that polarity in those extremes, and all of the life force and workforce of the human population had removed the debt service, and all the hidden taxes and everything, and all of that monetary capacity was directed to social benefit, cleaning up the planet and everything. Imagine what kind of world we would build in the next 10 years. Well, that's the world we are going to build, and that's the mechanism, because all the debt has been settled already.
Wow. Wouldn't that be lovely to know it? I mean, you say you know that yes. All debt is to be removed from the earth. Well, if that's the case, then, oh my gosh, think about the stress taken off people, the people who are thinking of suicide because of financial matters.
Right. Yeah, think about all the ramifications of all that stress, domestic violence, divorce, fragmentation of the family unit, polarization in racial terms, all that stuff. It would go away. Crime, most crime that millions of people are in prison is because of the stress and, the futility of doing anything else.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it on a lower level, if you like. Getting involved in low level crime is usually because you can't afford to live in the normal society you're living in, and you're having difficulty with it. So you end up, you end up petty crime, end up in prison. Look, the whole system needs to change, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
all of it. Oh.
So how much time do we have left?
We've got about 20 minutes. So
okay. All right. Well, let me explain what I said.
Okay.
The word constitution is obviously related to a word called or stated as constitutor. Constitutor is defined as one who takes upon himself or itself the debt obligation of another party. So if Sean, you owe Bob $1,000, and I come to you and I say, you know what, Sean, I want to free you of that, so you're free from that debt. I'm going to take on the obligation of that $1,000 to Bob, and now Bob can only look to me as the obligated party.
Okay.
Right? That makes sense? That makes me the constitutor.
Okay.
Look it up in a law dictionary. You'll see that that's so. So all constitutions are debt instruments. They are organic acts to put forward the structure of a governing body. But that government body is established to maintain and manage the assets of the governed body in order to protect the interests of the creditor. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yes.
That's how government is structured, and that's what constitutions are in the fundamental level of it. Now, with respect to the United States, almost nobody knows this history that I'm just going to briefly synopsize, and everybody should look up the documents that I'm referencing and read them and study them and see that what I'm saying is accurate. So the history from 1776 to 1789 goes like this. Declaration of Independence, 76. Articles of Confederation written and issued, 77. Articles ratified November 1781. Those articles established something called the United States of America, with the word "the" part of the formal name capitalized. It's the first article in those articles. The style of this confederacy shall be known as the United States of America. So if you say the as an article, meaning the word the ball, the apple, the Constitution, the United States of America, that's just the article describing the noun. If you say capital the, that's part of the name. Okay. So the articles establish the United States of America, distinct entity. Now, those United States, that union, and it's established it as a perpetual union, that union made up of 13 free and independent states, because the Declaration said these united with a small u, so it's not part of the name, states of America are free and independent. So the 13 states were free and independent, came together, created a confederacy called the United States of America as a perpetual union. So those 13 original states are a perpetual union. Okay.
Okay.
But they also took on the debt to do the war, the Revolutionary War. That debt was to France, was made up of 18 million gold livres, the coin of France. Mm-hmm. In 1782, since the Confederacy had come together, and that Confederacy had designated an entity to represent the Union, and that agent or entity was called the United States in Congress Assembled. That's where the word United States come in. Okay. That's different than the United States of America. So in 1782, the United States of America, represented by the United States in Congress Assembled, had to memorialize in a proper secured instrument the debt owed to France. And that was in a treaty called the Treaty of Versailles in 1782. And in it, it said, United States in Congress Assembled, blah, 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 owes 18 million gold livres to France. And the first debt payment on that is scheduled for 1787. So it had 5 years, 4 years, 4.5 years to start making payments. Well, Congress Assembled had no assets and no income. So it was an impossibility to begin with. The next year in 1783, based on having memorialized that debt, they issued what was called the Treaty of Peace in 1783, which was signed by 3 representatives of the United States and the United States of America, all 3 of whom were esquires: Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and John Jay. Esquire means that they actually were agents of bonded oath holders to the 4 Inns of Court, which are the basis of law in the city of London. So they were signing for one entity, really 2, the United States and the United States of America, as agents of the Crown, as well as for the American entities. And in that treaty in 1783, it said, King George III, who is King of England, King of France. So the creditor to the debt that was memorialized the year before is actually George III. So he was financing the war and fighting against those that he was financing, and who was really behind him was the Rothschilds, of course. Mm-hmm. So he was King of England and France. He was Duke of Brunswick and Lunenburg, which are Germanic principalities combined with Venetian black nobility families, or the 13 families. He was a duke of those 2 particular dukedoms or duchies. And it also said he was the arch-treasurer and the prince-elector of the Holy Roman Empire and the, small article, the United States of America. So that's a different United States of America than the perpetual union created by the Articles.
Yeah.
Do you follow that?
I do, of course. I mean, I'm looking at people's contracts with banks and problems they're having with courts, and a comma can change the whole of a corporation's name. Right. You know, things like that. They do play games and change things to make different meanings.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there is a comma between he's prince elector and treasurer arch-treasurer of the Holy Roman Empire, comma, and the United States of America.
Right.
But if you look at the proper Oxford grammar usage of the English language, if you say Bob, Joe, and Sally, I was always taught you do Bob, comma, Joe, and Sally without a comma.
Without a comma,
but
yeah.
the proper Oxford usage is Bob, comma, Joe, comma, and Sally. So it lists all those things, and then it says comma and the United States of America. So it is still George III who is a perpetual corporation sole as the monarch of, and the crowned monarch of the Crown Corporation of the City of London, and his successors all the way to Elizabeth II. So that meant that the Crown held the position of the money, the arch-treasurer, and the land, Prince Elector, because the Prince Electors were the electoral body of the Germanic principalities. This is before Germany was unified in the 1780s. So the Prince Electors were the ones who held the land, and that relates to the Holy Roman Empire and other things. And eventually, of course, some of those German principalities became the kings and queens of England.
Right, so the Guelphs and the Estes and the House of Hanover and things like that.
Exactly, the Guelphs and the Estes, very important. Those are exactly them. So look up those names. You'll see they're part of the Venetian families. Guelph and Steste, of many names. So so now you have the crown being the United States of America, and the United States in Congress assembled representing the 13 confederated perpetual union states. And you have a debt that is due to be paid, beginning to be paid in, I believe, July of 1787. So what happened is they didn't pay the debt. So the creditor said, you must form an instrument that protects my commercial interest in that debt that you have defaulted on. So let's create a constitution and a constitutor who will take on the obligations of the former party, which was the United States in Congress assembled, and create an organic act, a constitution, to create the governing body or entity that will make sure my interests are protected, meaning the crown or George III and his successors. That's the Constitution. If you look at Article 6 in the Constitution, it says, the first line, henceforward, all debts and engagements previously valid against the Confederacy are henceforward valid against the United States. So now you have a new United States being created, because the preamble of the Constitution says, we the people of the United States. And some people have said, well, that's just the aristocracy who left it to their own posterity. But no, that's not the way it's structured. The people did create the states. They declared them as free and independent. They formed the Union. They created the United States and Congress assembled. And so it is we, the people of the United States, underneath those sovereign entities or entities delegated with partial sovereign authority through the articles and so forth. So we, the people, in order to form a more perfect union for these different things that it states, do hereby establish and ordain for the United States of America, this Constitution for the United States of America. Which United States of America? The Crown, as I just described. Yes. So that's a contract to create a federal entity as a governing entity to have a certain territorial jurisdiction defined in Article 1, creating a Congress that has a president. That president is the vice president. How is the vice president elected? Well, we look at Article 2 that says there shall be a president of the United States of America. So the office of president of the United States of America is an office that will govern the federal entity, but also is there to protect the interest of the crown.
All right.
Yeah. See how that all fits together?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's been well planned and...
Yeah, well, you go back to thousands of years, but you also go back to 1540, which started a 24-year period of the Council of Trent, which was the Jesuits who were formed by Ignatius Loyola in 1536, who was on a mule train hauling gold out of the Four Corners to the ports in Texas to haul them over back to Spain. And he got this download that he was supposed to go to Rome and say, hey, I'm it, and we're going to form this order called the Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits. And 4 years later, they had a 24-year council that planned out the entirety of the next 500 years,
Wow.
or 400 to 500. If you want to read about that, look for John Eric Phelps, The Vatican Assassins, and he'll tell you the whole history in that book. It's online in a PDF form. So anyways, all of this was planned, mapped, strategized. And in fact, I just read a document that just popped up in my looking for another document in my computer, and I found this other document that I hadn't read for years, and it was an interesting thing referencing the fact that the 48 states on the continent of the North America were planned in the 1600s because there were 48 principal families in the Germanic and the Holy Roman Empire and Venetian and Rome that had primary stake, and each one was going to get a jurisdiction of one of the 48 states.
Wow, right.
And but back to our Constitution. So when 1789 comes along, the first presidency is enacted, you have a federal entity that's foreign to the 13 states. It is a bankrupt because it has no assets and no income and a big chunk of debt. 18 million gold coin at that time was billions of dollars in our time.
Yes,
okay,
yes.
Many billions. So it's completely bankrupt, in debt. It enters a period of 70 years of bankruptcy with no underlying collateral. That ended in 1859. So now it had to be rolled over, which it could do 2 more times for a total of 3 times 70 years. So 1859, it defaulted. It had to roll over into a new bankruptcy period of 70 years. Now the creditor says, I want collateral. What is that collateral? It's going to be the first overlay between 1861 to 1871 in the 1870s. What was created was a municipal corporation in the District of Columbia that became the corporate United States. And that corporate United States created a system of property titles. In the same year, Chicago title was created in Chicago, and the Great Chicago Fire was created to burn a lot of land records and convert true land holding records to property title that would be monetized through insurance, through title known as the Chicago Title Company. Today, when you buy property, you get a title put into your franchise name, which is property of the United States, not yours. You're given a right of tenancy and a right of mortgage and a right of debt servicing, but the true title belongs to the collateralization overlay. So that the period of bankruptcy, no underlying collateral. The second one, from basically 1859 to 1929, was the creation of property titles, which then the second 70 years ended with no resolve of the debt. So it had to be rolled over to the third time. The third time, by 1933 and through the 1930s, was to put the overlay titled bondage attachment to the flesh, to the people. Remember, the Pope in 1302 says, I own all land, all flesh, and eventually all souls. Mm-hmm. So 1929 started the next 70-year period. 1933 started the formal period of the another layer of the bankruptcy that was going to conclude in 2003. What happened in 2003? The perpetual war on terror, the attack on Iraq, the return to Babylon, the return to the Mesopotamian, Fertile Crescent, and the creation of a system that would become the global monetized attachment to all human living beings' flesh on the planet.
So then they had the land and the people.
Now you have the land and the flesh,
Yes,
the people.
Yes.
So now that was intended to collapse the third and final period of bankruptcy in 1999, leading to what? Y2K, the intended collapse of the computer system and the reanimation of a new monetary system. Right. Well, by then, the good guys were gaining position and foothold, and that was prevented from happening, technically speaking. During the 2000s into the 2000 teens, the last 10 years, the good guys in the military and the taking control of the office of the executive through the last 4 years, etc., was put in place, and other mechanisms were put in place that I can't discuss. But things happened to finally resolve through the private side, the equity side, the underlying estate side, to basically settle and close all debt attached to that debt instrument called the Constitution. And at this point, who else was attached to that Constitution? You look at World War II and the creation of the UN, the IMF, the Bretton Woods Agreement, eventually 1971, the petrodollar. All of this was done to create vast amount of monetized debt, a central bank system, and national corporations that were attached as subdivisions of the parent corporation called the United States Inc. in Washington, D.C., the third of the Triple Crown declared in 1302 by the Pope.
Yeah.
So all corporations on the planet, national corporations, have central banks. Those central banks created franchises and bonded debt and monetized debt to bond the flesh through the master corporation of the United States, which was basically a debtor facility to protect this presumptive debt from the Crown Corporation established the way I said. So that's how the Constitution is the master debt instrument on the planet, binding all flesh and all land, but only as an overlay. And when that overlay is settled and closed, when that contract is finally closed, which it has been, then all debt must be removed from the land and must be removed from the flesh. And so each living being must claim his or her life, his or her soul, spirit, and your living embodiment, and issue a mandate of non-consent and non-compliance to be the acting surety for all of this debt that is no longer valid or in existence.
Yeah, that is incredible. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we are to move into a world where there is no debt?
Sean, you keep saying, wouldn't it be wonderful? Well, how about we say it is wonderful?
Well, I'm still in debt, Ken, so, you know.
Well, you'll be for a little while, but let's wait and see what happens in the next 6 months. Let's shift from wouldn't it be wonderful to it is wonderful. It's like Jimmy Stewart, it's a wonderful life.
Well, I hear you, Ken, but I tell you what, until I do see Hillary Clinton behind bars and the people behind Dominion behind bars and all the rest of it, you know, until I see that and we genuinely see that, and according to what you say and many other people too, we will see that. So, you know,
so
looking forward to
just hold this as a pending possibility. Don't believe it till you see it. That's fine. I know it, therefore I'm part of creating it. And I've built what I've built with many people to hold a unified resonant field to be creating this. And I invite all living beings who wish to walk out of debt bondage and the Babylonian system, walk out of Babylon, and there is going to be a lawful way to do that and to walk into life and start reclaiming our entirety of our being, our soul, our living body, our genetics, and the land, and assisting and supporting the first people who are the stewards of the land get back to true sovereign standing and integrity on the land and join a co-creative force that will actually actually take this world back to the power of the law and the people. And
well,
there you have it.
I daren't say it. I daren't say it, but wouldn't it be lovely? And
Would it be lovely? Isn't there a song?
so on that note, Ken, we have come to the end of the 2 hours, my friend, and it is going to be amazing, I suppose, events taking place over the next month. Will you come back next month and give us your take on it?
Of course. I will continue to report. And let's finish with one last question, real simple. The last one just asked, he's apparently, I would say, an Irishman. He asks, can I connect through you with those similarly to me in Ireland? Any guidance or contact? Do the same thing that I said for Marie. Take the steps to become part of Panterra, and then we'll link you up with those in Ireland.
It sounds
Australia.
very much like he's done it. He sounds like he's even done his first essay and all the rest of it. So, yeah. So I'd say just connect him up, and that'd be great. If there are
just
people in Ireland.
keep going, and just by the next time we talk, we'll be able to announce the website for the proclamation, and let's just stay focused, stay grounded, and know that we're going to do this.
Absolutely. There are a couple of other questions that are outstanding, but maybe we'll cover them next week.
Yeah.
I think we have actually covered a few in past, so they're asking questions that we might have already covered. But Ken Scott, I want to thank you so much for coming on Out of the Bag again for the 12th time. That is a dozen shows of 2 hours each time. Mm-hmm. So Ken Scott from Panterra Private Contract Association and Gemstone University, thank you so much for coming back on Out of the Bag.
My pleasure. Thanks.